To thank you for making Subway footlongs famous, now enjoy any regular footlong as a $5 footlong. That's right, any, including your favorites, like the savory chicken and bacon ranch. Any Subway regular footlong is just $5. Hurry in.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
All right, this is a big day. Two-part Mega March Madness preview podcast. Today, we have Ryen Russillo from the Scott Van Pelt Show, as well as the NBA Today podcast. We're going to break down the brackets a little bit. And also Chad Ford from ESPN.com. He's going to tell us about the draft prospects. Tomorrow, part 2, Chad Millman, Cousin Sal, and House. Breaking down all the other stuff. But now, we're going to call him our bracket expert from the Scott Van Pelt Show. From the Scott Van Pelt Show, Boston's own, Ryen Russillo. What's happening?
It's a very nice introduction, Bill. Thanks for having me.
You're on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. I know you're very familiar with that.
I'm very familiar with its work and all its $5 footlongs.
Yeah, I didn't know if you knew about the $5 footlongs.
Any one of them, I believe, now. They actually have one read that's like a flavorific thing on Facebook, and it's just like, who wrote that? No one was... You were kidding, right?
I listen to your show from time to time, and you actually follow college basketball, which puts you in an elite group of not a lot of people that I know. You know what's going on.
Yeah, I try to cover both the college and the pro game, but it also helps with draft stuff too. And one day I hope to be a draft guy, maybe 10 years from now. But
I'm rooting for you.
I appreciate that.
And that's, you just described really the only reason why I watch college basketball, because the product itself is awful. And you tell this to college basketball fans, oh, the atmosphere is awesome, but it's terrible. The offenses that they run, and it's just like, it's hard to watch for me. But I love watching it to see stuff like yesterday, like John Wall, who short arms 2 shots in the last 20 seconds of regulation, then comes back and makes a crazy 3 to clinch the game. I like that. That showed me a little something.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about Kentucky as you're talking about bad offenses, because what they run is a lot of fun to watch usually. But
yes,
I think that's your own NBA thing. Like I know you're into the NBA to a certain degree.
Yes, I'm on that side, and I'm against anybody who's not on that side.
Yeah, and I just feel like I'm one of those guys that, during the Civil War might have said, hey, why can't we just all hang out? We have some of the same interests. And you apparently fall into that group that can't do that. And I feel like on many levels, I'll say, there's stuff about the NBA I can't stand, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to not like the league. And there's stuff about college basketball I don't like. And yet I still love the product. And this is my favorite sporting event of the year, the tournament.
Very diplomatic answer. I liked it. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to nitpick with the NBA, you could start with somebody like, Rasheed Wallace.
Right. Or the fact that people are actually getting worse at calling a charge block. Or that no one seems to use common sense when they're saying, hey, I don't know, TJ Ford weighs 160 pounds. Yeah. And I don't know, that other guy weighs 300 pounds and he fell down. I guess we'll hit TJ with the foul there. So I see that stuff late and it drives you nuts. And I don't know. I just, like I said, I try not to have to like 100% of something to like it.
I like the way you think.
Thank you.
The Celtics right now are actually the best advertisement for why March Madness is a better product, if you want to argue that, because the argument of the Celtics is, they're bored by the regular season. They're ready for the playoffs. Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you're bored by the regular season as I'm paying $180 to go see your next game. I just can't believe that is an actual logic that was espoused.
Yeah, that's out there because it was also a group of people that were saying they're probably going to go past 72 wins when the season started. And I looked at it the other day, as you probably realize this, they were 23-5 at one point, and since that time they're 18-19. And it's like, who are they? Are they the 20? Because then people say, well, look at their record. They're still over 600. They're the number 4 seed and all these things. It's like, that's not who they are. They're like a team that got off to a really good start that is really more like the team we've seen recently. And, to see the Cleveland toy with them yesterday like they did and just go, okay, now we want to go back up by 15. Okay, and there's just a lack of any life. Like, I'm doing my first game Wednesday this season. This is the first TV game I'm doing for Celtics TV. because of my schedule this year. I haven't been able to do it, and I feel like I'm coming in as the Grim Reaper of truth when I do that game, because I'm with you. This isn't like, hey, we'll dial it up once the playoffs happen. They're just a very average basketball team, and they have been for about 2 months.
Couldn't agree more. I think the 18-19 is a reflection of what this team is, and I don't think we put enough stock into the former Seattle Sonics. Their record is, I forget what it is, but it's much better than their record, because they're playing 20 games over 500 the last 40 games, I think, something. Right.
I looked at this morning. I think they both have the same record, is 41 and 24, I think.
But they were like 3 games under 500 at one point. So, yeah, there you go. A good segue though, because there are a couple college basketball teams that maybe didn't finish the season as strong as they started it. Are you one of those guys that likes the momentum, or do you like the pedigree?
Yeah, I don't. I think we get way too worked up about like how we look at teams and say, oh well, they lost late. Now, if you're Wake Forest, who just can't win any games, and you're going to love this stat because you love to criticize the coaches. Dino Gaudio, who he took over in a tough spot, obviously, but he's 0-4 in postseason games and has been the higher seed in all of those games and has lost by double digits every time. Oof. So now, granted, they're playing Texas, and Texas, I love when people say, well, no one can figure them out. Yeah, actually, we can. They aren't good. That's who they are, and we figured it out. But I don't look at Syracuse and say, oh, I'm off a Cuse now because they had a late loss. Now, if Onawaku's not going to be healthy enough to play, although they've already decided they're going to beat my Vermont Catamounts, they just assumed we'll see if we can have them for the next weekend. It's like, you guys still have some work to do, boys, against the Cats. And I don't look at teams and say, okay, I really liked you, and now this past week has made me not like you. Like, if I haven't liked you, it's probably because of something you've done in the 30 games.
The one exception, I think, is Purdue, though.
Yes, because if you take away Hummel, who I think is their best player, he just does a million things for them. And he's not Evan Turner, but he was their answer to him at times, and they had some great matchups. But essentially the team's turned into Etuan Moore, just kind of dribbling around. And think about them. I mean, they were flirting with a 1 seed, and now they're a 4. But I think that's what the committee does, is they look at this. They even said with Cuse, they bumped them behind Duke on the 1 line because of the Onawaku injury. So it's a heartless process, but I don't have a problem with it.
The big thing yesterday that I noticed, and just on Twitter, it seemed like a bunch of people are going crazy about, and with reason, is Duke getting the 1 in the South, but then getting Villanova as a 2, Baylor as a 3, and then Purdue, as you said, missing their best player as the 4. And meanwhile, Kansas, who I always thought was the best team in the country, somehow they end up with Ohio State 2nd. Now everybody's, they're RPI, whatever. They have Evan Turner. I don't want to play Evan Turner in March Madness.
No, and I actually like some of the players on the team with Leidy and Buford and Dallas Lauderdale, who kind of falls into the bad hair college guy conversation.
And then they got Georgetown 3. You got Maryland 4. Michigan State 5.
I agree. I don't know how
brutal.
I don't know how Duke got this. Now, apparently they had KU as the number 1 overall seed, but you telling me would I rather play Baylor or Nova? And I actually like Baylor. I do like them, but say Georgetown beats Ohio State. Although I don't know if they can with their coach be consistent enough. I'm not a huge JT3 guy. I don't even necessarily like saying JT3 because I think even that's a little cheesy. But
I kind of enjoy it.
You do?
Yeah.
All right. Maybe I'll reassess where I am with that. But, I'm with you because I'd rather play any of the 3s. And I was kind of breaking it down here. It's like, look, if you get past the play-in winner, which I assume is going to happen with Duke, and I thought Duke was going to end up getting a 1 seed, but they've been overseeded over the years, and I don't know that this one is an example of them being overseeded. I mean, they won the ACC, although the ACC's kind of down this year. But then you get Cal or an A&M Purdue winner, and A&M easily could win that game against Purdue, but would you rather do that or face Michigan State or Maryland? I'd much rather have Duke's path. So
you don't see Louisville. You don't see our old friend Coach P. If you're Coach P, this is pretty nice. You're playing. The Pac-10 was terrible this year. You get a Pac-10 team in round 1, and then Duke. Probably, if you're going to play a 1 seed, that would be the one I'd want to play out of the 4.
Unless they get to play Syracuse and beat them for a 3rd time. But that probably wouldn't happen because excuse would be like, hey, how about not losing to this team that's a 9 seed?
Yeah.
That's been super inconsistent. I mean, like Louisville gets smoked the same week. Who'd they lose to? Marquette by 20, I think. in the week that they beat Syracuse, but then everybody looks at the bigger win and says, hey, but I don't know. Pitino, I did think it was every time he references anything to anything else, he's just a different guy, you know? Like, and he'll say, well, of all the great things I've done, whether it's Providence or Kentucky or Boston, you know, like, whoa, back up.
He doesn't really throw Boston in there, does he?
Yeah, he threw it in the mix after they beat Cuse on the closing of Freedom Hall.
He destroyed
you didn't catch
Boston. No, I somehow missed that. That would have really made me angry.
Do you know that my dad...
I went to all those games.
My dad bought me the book that he wrote, Success is a Choice.
I have it as well.
How excited were you when you got it as a gift?
He released it pretty much within a year after he had completely decimated the Celtics.
Yeah, it was almost and we'll definitely get off on a tangent here, so we probably want to try to... Well, although this is your podcast.
I'll steer it back. Say your thing, I'll steer it back. I know.
It must have been like, okay, we're going to do a book deal, and had there been reality TV at that point, then clearly he would have been on VH1. And, like, they're just talk about, oh, man, it was amazing to think. And then we were all so excited about it, but it was like every bad decision that you could possibly make. I mean, he was the pre-Isaiah, essentially. But,
he really was.
Okay, sorry. We'll get too carried away.
I'll keep it on track. Who's your favorite 4 or 5 seed? 4 or 5? Because usually there's one that makes the Final Four. You just got to figure out which one.
Let me think here. I don't really love Maryland. I mean, I'm not saying I'd want to play against them, but they really didn't beat anybody until they beat Duke at home. Michigan State is kind of ending the season as a mess. They actually have more wins than you would think. I guess I'm stalling a little here.
Would you buy Vandy?
Yeah, I was going to say Vandy because I like that Wisconsin always is able to play with everybody, and Temple's a pretty good team. Wisconsin just plays a style that's just kind of brutal to deal with. But Vandy has finished strong, and if they were to play Syracuse, they've got this freshman Jenkins who doesn't miss threes. Like, he just doesn't miss any. Ogilvy was on the NBA draft radar, but he's just kind of soft. He's just a big dude. I believe he's from down under, but I don't know if that's New Zealand or Australia. And they got Taylor, the 6'7" wing kid, I think he's from Sweden, who's actually a pretty nice player. So they've looked good on certain nights when I've watched them play. An SEC play. But, yeah, I would go with them. I would go with Vandy as the 4 I think I like the most out of this group.
You enjoy Temple at all? I like the Spanish kid. Thought he was good.
Is that the full breakdown right there, the Spanish kid?
Yeah, that's all I got.
That's not Pepe, right?
No.
He used to play there. I'm kidding.
I think he's good. I like the Spanish, the Spanish in general, all those guys. I've always enjoyed. I even like Juan Carlos Navarro.
What about Peter Ramos? Remember that kid? And
I didn't like
I'm
Peter
talking about
much.
Pepe Sanchez. Did he play at Temple? Yeah, he did.
Juan Fernandez.
I just didn't want somebody to think I was saying something wrong. I was like, no, that was actually his name. Juan Fernandez, you had high. What about the indifference to defense, though? Like, that's not helping Toronto right now.
True.
My
dad
play
zone in college.
My dad thought that Manu Ginobili was Italian this whole time.
Oh, well, maybe he is. I'm not ready to rule that out.
That's a good point.
Upset top 3 seed that will lose within the first 2 rounds.
Top 3 seed that will lose in the first 2 rounds. Okay. Are we ready for this?
Yeah.
I have Pitt going out to Xavier.
Ooh.
I think Pitt, Jamie Dixon has done an unbelievable job with that team, but they were picked 9th in the Big East preseason, man. I've seen them play twice in person, and I can't believe they were ranked. I can't believe they kept winning games, and I can't believe that they're a number 3 seed. I think that's seeding them far too high, and Xavier can beat them. So I would say Xavier over Pitt.
Are you one of those guys that likes backing a conference in general?
Big East, yeah.
Because I thought the ACC games I watched, I just thought they were really weak.
I'm with you. I mean, Georgia Tech couldn't inbound the basketball the entire week during the ACC tournament.
They have the worst guards. I think I felt bad for Favors because Favors is one of those guys. He might be the 3rd best guy in this draft for all we know, but his guards are so bad we don't even know what he's capable of.
That's what I used to talk about with LaMarcus Aldridge when he was coming out. Like, I thought there's no way you're taking anybody over Aldridge in this draft. You have to take him one, size, shooting touch, and when you'd watch them play, none of those Texas guards ever passed him the basketball. So then people would say, oh, he's a little passive. And I'd be like, dude, he's a 19-year-old sophomore who doesn't get any touches and has to run up and down the court. And I have no idea what to make of Favors, although I know he's played better as the second half of the season after he had this lull like in the middle of the year.
Yeah, he basically stopped rebounding.
Right, and Gani Lawal's probably a late lottery pick, man. And they'll just have runs there where either it's Shumpert, who's put up big scoring numbers, and I know they've had him as like a top 30 guy on Chad's list, and I didn't quite agree with that. But Udofia, the other kid, Gottlieb described him as trying to dribble with his elbows the entire game. So you're right about Georgia Tech, because they should be better. They've got maybe 3 NBA guys on the team, but
they'll shoot themselves in the foot if your guards don't. If you don't have the guards, you're not doing anything in March Madness.
Well, think about all the teams that have guard problems. Like North Carolina's got lottery picks, no guards. Wake has Al-Farouq Aminu, who's going to be a lottery pick, and overall between last year and this year, they're going to have like 5 NBA players on the roster. They have no guards, or at least anybody that can hit a shot. Florida State has 3 dudes. They're bigs. They're all going to play in the pros, and they don't have any guards. And all these teams are like barely 500 teams when you look at their conference play. And even Georgia Tech was like 6-9 or something coming out of the regular season. So, if you don't have those guys, you almost have no chance in this thing.
The other thing when you're trying to figure out, because I'm like you, my favorite thing about the tournament, it actually is a little bit to me like the Real World with the Real World Road Roast Challenge.
Are you admitting you like it now, though?
No.
What just happened?
I love the tournament. What are you talking about?
Okay.
I'm just saying the product frustrates me. The people just jacking up threes with 4 seconds left in the shot clock. But to me, it's a feeder system. The Real World is a feeder system for the challenge, which is my true love. And March Madness is a feeder system to the NBA. And I do think the thing that we forget, like, for instance, Evan Turner had 10 turnovers in the semifinal? He had the 31-10-10, but 10 turnovers.
Sure.
And the John Wall backers, because this has become like a very miniature version of Durant Odin, where you're in the John Wall school or you're in the, I'll tell you what, Evan Turner. Blah, blah.
Yeah, but don't you feel like people just do that to get noticed, though? That was like Cheryl Miller having the Milwaukee Bucks as the number 4 team on her power rankings this week on NBA TV.
Well, there's to a degree, but at the same time, Evan Turner, I don't think the number 1 pick is over, because this guy can play 3 positions. He can create his own shot. He basically has that Brandon Roy thing where you just watch him, you're like, oh, he'll be able to score 20 points a game just on that one move he has. He rebounds. He rebounds like really no guard we've seen. I mean, even Rondo didn't rebound like this. When you talk about a guy who's playing basically the 1 and the 2. But anyway, so he had the 10 turnovers, and the John Wall camp was, 10 turnovers. But Turner's just better than his teammates. Like, we saw this with Chris Paul a few years ago. Chris Paul didn't play well in the tournament. Everybody's like, Chris Paul. And I do think that hurt his stock. But his team sucked. And it's not his fault. He's playing, he's got guys that can't catch any of his passes or don't know where they're coming. You could tell he was just better. And I feel that way with Turner. I just think he's better than the guys he's playing with significantly.
Well, this is something, I know you spend a ton of time on. It's something I spend a ton of time on. But it just points to the human factor of how these guys are scouted. And that if you end up going on some run here, you're like, hey, wow. And these front offices start to talk themselves into these guys. And it's essentially their combine, It's a combine for the NBA draft. And I look back to Derrick Rose and Michael Beasley.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that anybody was going to go ahead of Beasley was thought to be preposterous. Just like, no way that could ever happen. But then you look at what Paul does with his franchise, and Darren Williams to a certain extent, that it felt
Darren
like...
Williams got really helped, I think, by the tournament, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that game against Arizona and getting to the final game.
And I think Mayo got hurt. Mayo was out. Was he out in 1 round, 2 rounds?
No, he went down in the first game. I think he lost to Beasley.
Yeah.
That was the only game he played.
And he ended up dropping to 5, whereas, I don't know if he makes the Final Four or whatever. This is why I think Turner...
Well, Mayo was weird because people had to, re-talk themselves into Mayo.
Yeah, they talked the back end. Yeah.
Right. They're like, okay, next LeBron. Okay, now he's not. Now I hate his guts. And then when you watched him going, okay, if I watch him without thinking he's supposed to be the next LeBron, what do I see? And I was like, I see a really tough kid who competes and is a well-rounded player and is going to be a really good defensive player. And yeah, he's not going to be LeBron, but I don't have to hate his guts for not doing so, We
saw the same thing. Great defender and a guy who's going to make 40% of his threes. He wasn't what he was being presented as.
Like,
and now we're seeing it in Memphis.
And I get killed on the podcast for asking this question, but when I watch, for some reason, I've watched a ton of Memphis games this year. If you're coming down to last possession, who do you want taking a shot, Rudy Gay or Mayo?
You want Mayo.
Yeah, because I just think Mayo's going to has a little bit more of that toot in him. Go ahead.
Well, you think the John Wall Turner thing? You think that's over? Wall is definitely number 1 because I don't feel like it's over.
Well, it also depends on what happens. Is Minnesota really going to take Wall? You know?
That would be great.
Wouldn't it be great?
I'd love it.
How about, you'll love this theory. I had somebody on the podcast ask me, and I thought it was great, as insane as it was, but he was like, I think they brought over JackO so that they'll treat him like just first class, better than anywhere else, and then when he goes back to Europe, he'll tell European dudes, hey, Minnesota's where it's at, and word will get to Rubio, and then Rubio will be like, well, the JackO thing went real well, based on my talks with him, so I'm going to sign up for him. I just
very interesting thing.
Do you like that? I mean, I don't think it's even remotely true, but I love that a guy thought about it and emailed me. So,
what did you think of what you saw from Kentucky this weekend?
Here's the thing about Kentucky is that I don't know if I criticize them or give them credit for getting off to slow starts and letting these teams hang with them when they're clearly superior talent-wise.
Yeah.
And you're saying, well, they're a young team and they can't get away with that. Or you can say, wow, it's really impressive that they're a young team and they find a way to blow these teams out late. I mean, obviously that didn't happen with Mississippi State, and I've seen Mississippi State play some awful basketball games this season. But I'm just wondering, if it comes to conference tournament, whoever's going to play them is going to play them close. If you had to have me guess which one would go out first, I would guess Kentucky would go out first. Based on Duke's matchup.
I don't trust them. I don't trust them because we saw it yesterday. First of all, very, very, very fluky win. Like you get the steal in the backcourt, and then you get basically came down to an intentional missed free throw that worked, which happens 5 out of 100 times.
Yeah, really. Like everyone, it's one of the worst skills going. Now, not that you want to be practicing missing free throws, but you think like some of the attempts, you wonder like it looks like the guy will try to throw it through the backboard, and you go, probably could have.
I'm glad you brought this up. I actually was thinking about this weekend. Why wouldn't you go to the severe right or severe left of the free throw line to attempt the missed free throw?
Right. I don't think it's as hard as people make it out to be. Now,
there's got to be some sort of science to it. Like I would think all right, I put my best rebound on the right side. I stand on the right side, and I'm intentionally going to whip it against the side of the rim in the backboard and hope it takes some weird bounce. It seems like there's a better way to do this.
Yeah, so you're not even talking shot. You're talking, hey, we have a plan, and it's going to ricochet off towards you.
A positioning. So you shoot it from the right side of the foul line, and you try to ricochet it back to where your best guy is. It seems like that would work.
I want to see this happen.
Yeah.
I think you should write a letter. Is there any way you can have a paper in the paperback NBA book? Could you add this chapter?
Well, I was thinking, the reason I was thinking about this was I don't think there's ever been less thought put into something that comes up more times in huge moments in a big game. How many times have we seen a team have to intentionally miss a free throw to get the rebound?
You know what, though? I'm sorry. I just can't say that it's in the same category as the let's dribble the clock out and never have a chance for an offensive rebound final possession. Hey, what do you guys want to run? I don't know. What gives us the least amount of chance of winning and getting a good look? We're like, 1, let's be in a hurry. 2, let's have the ball in the hands of somebody else who doesn't want it. And then 3, let's never leave an opportunity for an offensive rebound. And we're going to see a ton of those in the next couple of days. I can't wait. We should keep track of them.
Where do you stand on Derek Coleman Jr., a.k.a. DeMarcus Cousins?
I'm so scared of him.
Me too.
If your coach is yelling at you and swearing at you, and it's happened with Calipari numerous times, and the thing that Cousins says as a freshman is bleep you right back.
Yeah.
You're a freshman. If you want to have tude, maybe if you're all conference as a junior, you can go ahead and do it. And Calipari said, hey, you can still yell at the kids, but now we have kids that yell back at us, so it's a different game.
If I had the 4th pick and he's on the board, and obviously you'd have to take him 4, I would have to either trade down or I don't know what. If you're a GM, you can't tie yourself to him.
You've always been a character guy, though.
Huge character guy.
You've been about family values and team building.
He's got a look that I don't like. That's the best way I can put it. He's got a look that it's something about him. It's a guy I don't want on my team. I remember seeing Eddie Curry for the first time and thinking, that guy's got a look I don't like. There's no other way I can put it.
I like that Eddie Curry was like, hey, can we test you for this heart defect to see if it's genetic, if you're going to die? No.
Yeah. Stay out of my way.
No, you can't, actually.
You know what the amazing thing with Cousins, though? I think he's playing he's averaging 23 minutes a game or something. He's averaging 10.5 rebounds a game. His per minute is over 20.
Does Shire have him higher than Maurice Spates? Shire. What am I talking? Does Hollinger have Cousins higher than Maurice Spates? Because Maurice Spates is like the poster boy for unbelievable Hollinger player.
He is Mr. PER. Yeah. And then when you watch him, he's very, you're like, all right, he's okay.
I remember I pointed out flaws of PER to people. I was like, it seems like bigs that take 2 shots a game from no further than 12 inches away from the basket have a high PER.
Yeah. The way to do it is to play 20 minutes a game and crash the boards. And never shoot anything more than 2 feet. Never, ever.
Yeah. I mean, I remember he had Perkins as like a 20 at one point when Perkins was playing like 12 minutes a game. It's like, I got to get this guy more minutes.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that going to be? Yeah. So look, Cousins. If I was sitting there at 4, like I couldn't take Wesley Johnson over him. No. Obviously,
you'd trade down and hope the guy picked.
I'd bring in Rick Mahorn as an assistant to mentor him. And
I'd bring in 10 people as an assistant. You have to go.
I do.
Because we have to bring in more guests. Yeah, this is the Mega Podcast. So give us your final 4.
All right, I got KU, West Virginia, Cuse, and I'm going to go because I just think there's nothing worse than when somebody gives you 4 number 1s and then tries to explain why they did.
Yeah.
So I treat it like an art form, and I just get carried away and we see what we come up with. I have Baylor as my final 4 team.
Wow, what a story that would be.
Wouldn't it be? Especially
you're feeling like a 2006 George Mason repeat where a lot of parity and some weird team makes it.
No, because Baylor's a 3 seed. And George Mason ran into one of the most dysfunctional, talented teams in that UConn team ever.
Baylor's a 3 seed, but still it's Baylor.
It is.
I mean,
I like them, though.
You got to at least...
They get a lottery pick on that team. How weird would that be
if they made it?
Be weird. We cover it on our show. Who knows? I could even come back on the podcast if it happens. We do something like that.
So you didn't really take a limb if they're a 3 seed.
No, but who else is giving you Baylor? I mean, do you want to have me on and say, hey, I went KU, Cuse, Duke, and Kentucky? Like, that's not – who's that guy?
Jay Bills picked Cornell in his Final 4.
Good
or
for
his
him.
Final 8 or whatever. I respected that.
I think you should have to have one off-the-radar pick. And then if you don't, I don't care about – I don't want to know what your picks are. Right?
Yeah. That's why I might pick Temple.
I like it.
I'm going to ride the Spanish kid.
Yeah. The entire country will be supported.
They'll have like Gasol be going to a game. It'll be great. Wherever it is, it'll be good.
That would be good.
And did you give us your Pittsburgh as your team getting bounced?
Yes.
Do you have an 11, 12, 13 maybe sneaking into the Final 8 or something?
I don't think the 11 or 12s. Oh, okay. I thought you were asking if they were playing.
Double digits.
A double digit. UTEP at a 12 is curious. Cornell's a 12.
I watched that UTEP Houston game. And UTEP was clearly better, and Houston, whatever. One guy got hot and they ended up blowing the game. I thought UTEP wasn't bad. I could see that.
Wait a minute. I thought after the MIT thing, we've learned that no one actually gets hot.
Oh, that's true. I forgot. I apologize.
I hate that. I hate that argument that there's no such thing as the hot hand.
Well, you have to come back and we can argue about that.
All right, buddy.
Come back next week. All right.
All right. Done.
All right. Let's bring him in from the streets of Hawaii. Our NBA insider. He's on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, Chad Ford. This is one of your favorite times of the year, right?
Oh, my favorite. My very favorite time of the year.
Wall versus Turner. Done Done argument? Still some life in it? Turner could sneak it back?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think you would find a GM, if you were to get him to be totally honest with you, who would say that Evan Turner has the same NBA upside that John Wall does. And that's mainly because of the athleticism issue. Evan Turner is an okay athlete. John Wall is an ET athlete. He's so athletic that you watch him and you have to put your DVR in slow motion to kind of just see the things that he does. He's so good. And I think because of that, and because at the end of the day athleticism matters in the league, it's hard to make that argument. But here's what Evan Turner has going in his favor. This is a freaky year. There's been so many good young point guards come into the league the last couple of years because of the draft, including last year, which was an all-time phenomenal great draft for point guards, that a lot of the teams at the top, that is not their pressing need, is at point guard. Evan Turner, on the other hand, who is very versatile and can play three positions on the floor, fits just about every team well. And so you wonder if a team like Utah gets the number one pick and they have Deron Williams, even though John Wall's the better prospect, do they go ahead and take an Evan Turner, who's very, very good and who definitely fits their system? New Jersey may have that a little bit with Devin Harris, so I don't think they like Devin Harris enough to keep him and pass on John Wall. Minnesota has, Johnny Flynn. They've got Ricky Rubio waiting in the wings. Maybe that's something they would do. But I think at the end of the day, at the very least, everyone believes John Wall is the best player in this draft. Whether he goes number one or not, I guess there's a small chance he might not.
You mentioned my favorite thing about Turner is he's got that Swiss Army knife quality, that he could play three spots, and he could fit into a team that is either on the road to being half decent or, as you said, Utah. He could basically play wherever you wanted him to, and he can rebound. He can do all kinds of things. I do think that's going to be appealing to some of these teams because, as you said, it's a very point guard heavy league right now, and that's a spot where just a lot of teams are set. And you look at Turner, and basically he could do whatever you want him to do. I also, John Wall, as you said, he's definitely has that LeBron DNA of just he's the top level of athlete that you're ever going to come up with. But, he's still a freshman, and it's still a little bit more of a project where Turner could come right in. So I think it's going to depend on the team. But in terms of the tournament itself, how much of a factor do you think it is to have a big tournament when you start talking about these top three picks?
I think with the top three, or at least the top two, let's talk about Turner and Wall for a second. I think everybody's seen everything they need to see with these guys.
Okay.
In the tournament, both of them were throwing haymakers. John Wall was doing some last-second heroics. Evan Turner had a huge tournament in the Big Ten and hit a last-second shot to win it for Ohio State. Both of these guys have proven everything there is to be proven. I do think with some of the more what I would call upside picks, where you've watched them all year and you can see the potential, but they haven't always lived up to it, a guy like Derek Favors, let's say, from Georgia Tech, if he comes in and has a monster tournament, he's a guy who suddenly actually enters that conversation with Wall and Turner. Just because he has the physical profile that teams really covet, even more than they covet swingmen and even more than they covet point guards, to get a guy who's that athletic, has that big of an NBA body and that much upside. If he came in and just destroyed everybody in the tournament, that's the type of player that could really help his stock, I think, in the March Madness.
Ryen Russillo and I just talked about him. His guards are terrible, and those are always the toughest guys to figure out from a draft prospect. Ryan pointed out, like LaMarcus Aldridge when he was at Texas, his guards were terrible, and nobody kind of could really point out exactly how good Aldridge was. Do you feel the same with Favors here?
It's 100%. I'm sorry, but you look at their backcourt, and they do not know how to get Derek Favors the ball where he can score. And it's not just the backcourt. He also had a teammate, Gani Lawal, who really plays the same position that Favors did. He's a junior. He's trying to impress NBA scouts as well, and he's a marginal draft prospect. And early on in the season, you could see him taking all of the shots that normally would go to a guy like Favors, and Favors was just really there to kind of clean up the junk. Now, in the last 8 or so games, Favors has just taken over. He's better than Lawal. He's better than anybody on that team, and I don't think it's any surprise that Georgia Tech made it all the way to the ACC finals, in part because Favors was now getting the ball and doing more with it. And so, yeah, I mean, if this guy had a great point guard, I think he would be in consideration for the number one pick. I really do.
So they play Oklahoma State in round one. Ohio State plays UC Santa Barbara. In round two, those teams could play. You could have Favors versus Turner. How many NBA GMs and scouts would be in the building for that one? Rough.
All of them.
Literally everybody who has an NBA job?
All the GMs would be. The scouts have seen all these guys, and And typically how this goes is the GMs are moving the scouts around to the games they don't really want to cover. And so you're going to see the GMs at these more high-profile types of brackets, because those are the guys they want to get. And maybe I shouldn't say all of them. All the guys in the lottery, all the guys that actually have a chance at getting a player like that are going to be there. Not everybody has a chance to get an Evan Turner or a Derek Favors, but you're going to see all the top 8, 9 lottery teams. I think you see the GMs there to watch that game.
You tweeted yesterday that basically, if you have an NBA job, you're set either going to the Midwest or the East. You don't even need to go to the other 2 regionals unless you want to see Wesley Johnson. You stand by that?
Yeah, I mean, just Kentucky and Kansas alone, the first round and lottery picks just between those 2 teams alone is remarkable. And then I don't know what Kansas did to piss off the committee, but they were only the number 1 team in the nation really the whole year. But if you would have asked me before the brackets came out, my 4 teams to be in the Final Four, one of them would have been Kansas, one of them would have been Ohio State, a third one would have been Georgetown.
Wow.
And all 3 of them are in the same bracket. And then, they played Michigan State, which is not an easy draw either, if they make it to the Grade 8. This one is just stacked. I'm doing a column right now for ESPN.com about who to watch in each region. And, I mean, in Kansas's region, you could go on and on forever. There were 6 lottery picks in Kansas's region alone. And then in Kentucky has 4 players on their own team that are in the top 20. And, West Virginia has picks, and New Mexico has picks. Texas is loaded with picks, even though they've been really dysfunctional all year. And then you get down to Duke's region, and there isn't one lottery pick in the entire region.
Ugh.
Now, I know that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad region. They don't seed these teams based off of who has lottery picks. However, I don't think there's. I think when you look at Duke's region, it was by far the weakest region of the group.
I'm with you. I love Ohio State just because of Turner, and I think it's one of those years. And by the way, I'm always wrong with March Madness, so I'm probably jinxing them. But I just feel like it's going to be one of those years where the talent wins out, because there's really not a lot of elite guys. And this could be a year where somebody like Turner can just win 5 straight games. I was so bummed out that they were in Kansas's bracket, because that would have been my final probably. I would have picked Kansas versus Ohio State. And, if they go head-to-head, though, that is right up there in terms of most lottery picks in one game. I'm hard-pressed to remember a game that would have had more picks. You talk maybe 5 top 20 picks in that game.
In Kansas, Ohio State?
Yeah. To get that in a Final 8, potentially, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if Kansas meets Kentucky in the finals, that is the ultimate NBA draft. I mean, there are so many draft picks between those 2 teams combined. It's crazy. It's like watching the rookie-sophomore All-Star game on All-Star weekend.
DeMarcus Cousins, just talked about him with Russillo. Clearly he's going to be a top 5 pick in this draft. He's averaging over 10 rebounds a game, playing 23 minutes. Obviously has some questions about personality. The Kentucky fans love him. Like, I've tweeted a couple times wondering, like, oh my God, this guy's a head case, or Derek Coleman Jr. And they're like, actually, this kid's a really, he's a good guy. He's a hothead, but he's not a Derek Coleman. Where do you stand on this?
He's a hothead. I understand we're all homers towards certain teams, and I feel the same way towards Kansas. I grew up a huge Jayhawk fan, and I tend to excuse every fault and every problem with them, and that makes it hard for me to actually evaluate Kansas prospects, because I tend to like it. But I tend to like them. But there is no way that you cannot watch DeMarcus Cousins and not see that this is a guy who has a problem controlling his temper. And you just watched it in the last game. You had Calipari throw him out of a huddle at one point. His body language is just absolutely awful. all the time on the court. And at the end, he got cheap shots. He gets cheap shots. He gets a lot of them, actually. And why does he get them? Because players know. It's a little bit like Ron Artest, right? Players know that if you push Ron, he may do something stupid. And so you've got all sorts of players throwing elbows and things at Cousins, trying to get him to go off so he gets a technical. And I don't think that's going to get better as he gets into the league. I think he's got the demeanor a little bit of forget Derek Coleman, because I think Derek Coleman in a little ways was kind of too passive at times. He kind of reminds me of Steve Wallace.
Really? That's interesting. So yeah, you raise a good point. He's not a dog. He's a hothead, which. So sometimes you're right. He would go the Rasheed Wallace path over the Derek Coleman path. Maybe I should start calling him Rasheed Wallace Jr.
Yeah, I mean, you always look at Rasheed and you just never know when he's going to lose it. And I think I think Cousins could rival Sheed for a number of technicals that he gets in a season because he's going to lose it. And but he's incredibly talented, and he's a guy who's going to come into the league immediately and be a potential 2010 guy in the league. He's going to be able to play right now. I will say this about Cousins, though, and you saw it a little bit in the game where you had Mississippi State versus Kentucky, and you had Jarvis Varnado out there, who's a long, athletic shot blocker. Cousins is not a great athlete.
Yeah.
He's not an above the rim guy, and guys that are long and have length and are explosive give him problems. And he can use his body and strength to beat those guys up a little bit, but they do give him problems, and I do think that's a potential issue in the league. He's such a man playing against boys in college basketball. He can do about whatever he wants in the paint. That's going to change a little bit when he gets to the NBA. He'll still be very strong for an NBA big in the NBA, but there's other guys that are going to be just as strong and more athletic than he is.
I thought Varnado ate his lunch. I have a very important question for you. What number on the Clippers do you think Cousins is going to wear?
Is it just destined to happen?
It's so destined. In fact, you know what? I'll probably talk myself into him by November 12th. He's not a bad guy. I like Cousins. He's a good guy. I've had lunch with him. He's nice. I like it. But he's just so destined to be in the Clippers. I can't even stand it. I just know it's going to happen.
That would be a disaster.
He's right in the range too, where they're going to be picking. They'll be in the 4 to 6 range. I mean, he's right there. It just makes so much sense.
Maybe the Neil O'Shea era will be different, and I like Neil a lot. I actually think a lot of the good things that have happened in the Clippers the last few years, and I know there hasn't been a lot, but a lot of the good things that have happened have been Neil O'Shea type of things. And so maybe the karma's going to change there a little bit.
There have been good things that happened with the Clippers?
Sure.
I'm racking my brain right now trying to think of one. I think this whole Clippers thing is funny because people think they're going to go out and get a GM. The lockout's coming. There's no way they're going to go out and spend big money on a GM and then have to pay that guy during the lockout. I think they're going to – my prediction is they'll renew O'Shea for a year. And they'll renew Kim Hughes for a year because Sterling is cheap. He's not going to want to pay a coach and then have to pay that guy through the lockout either. So I just think that's the way he thinks, and that's how it plays out. Not that matters.
I see it a little bit differently because I actually think the one thing Neil O'Shea brings to the table is that he used to work for Arntellum. He was a huge workout guy, was there with all the AAU kids. A lot of players in the league have relationships with Neil O'Shea, and they like him. And I think there's a little bit of a strategic move, and I know you may have a hard time believing the Clippers are being strategic, that O'Shea might be able to leverage some of those relationships along with his close relationship with Arntellum to get some people in L.A. and to hire a legitimate coach. I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but I do think they are going to make a very, very strong push for LeBron James. I don't get it. But I think they're going to make it, and I think Neil O'Shea is going to be part of that, and I think they'll tell him they'll hire whatever coach LeBron wants, and maybe there's a coach out there, and I think they'll probably fail at the end of the day, but I think they're going to make a strong effort.
I don't think it's crazy. In fact, I think it's going to be what happens. The comedy part of it is going to be the Clippers trying to court anybody. I mean, ultimately, it's going to involve LeBron James flying here, getting on off an airplane, going to the Staples Center, and somebody saying, LeBron, I want you to meet Donald Sterling. Isn't that the deal breaker right there? It's over at that point.
Over. I agree. That's the part where it all breaks down.
Whereas, like, Dallas would be like, hey, it's Mark Cuban. Hey, come on. Here's come to my. We rented out the football stadium with 80,000 Maverick fans. Here, come on in. Watch the scoreboard presentation we did for you. And that's where the Clippers have no chance because they don't think that way. Let's get back to the draft quick. I mean, not the draft, the March Madness, the feeder system for the draft. Wesley Johnson?
Yeah, he's good. He's really good.
Top six?
Yeah, he's top six. And, one thing that shows up with Wesley Johnson is it's very rare that you see a college basketball player, and in fact an NBA player for that matter, who can average 2 steals and 2 blocks a game.
Yeah.
That is a very rare combination of a stat. And Johnson isn't quite there, but he was there most of the season. He's very close to that number this year. He's athletic. He's also a guy who's really versatile. He can do it from a number of different standpoints. He can shoot the three. He can go inside. He can handle the ball. He's been a little passive. I think the one thing that concerns me a little bit about Wesley Johnson is that he's not been a guy who will necessarily take over a game the way an Evan Turner or a John Wall can take over a game, but he's really good.
Who would you compare him to?
I wanted to say Josh Smith of the Hawks because he's a great athlete, and Josh Smith is one of those few guys in the league who might block 2 shots and grab 2 steals a game. He's one of those guys who's a contender to do something like that. So I think Josh Smith's a little bit more oriented towards the 4, and I think Wesley Johnson's more oriented towards the 3 in the position they're going to play for the pros. But he's that type of player. I've also heard Joe Johnson a little bit. I think Joe Johnson's a better shooter than Wesley Johnson is, but he's going to be some sort of swing guy like that.
Rudy Gay?
Rudy Gay, I think is another good one. I think actually Wes Johnson, a little bit better defender, a little bit better versatility. I think Rudy Gay is kind of stuck right in one position. I think Wesley Johnson will be a little more versatile. I think he'll play some 3. I think he'll play some 2 at times, and might be able to even play a little 4.
If he has a monster tournament, could he play himself up to number 3?
Yeah, for sure. He could. His biggest problem is position. It's NBA GMs feel like they can get swing guys in other positions in the draft. It tends to be point guards and bigs are the 2 things that go early because they're in such short supply, and that's why I think Cousins and Favors have an advantage. Even Ed Davis, who had a so-so year but really suffered from the exact same problem that Derek Favors did. He had absolutely terrible backcourt at North Carolina this year. Nobody could get him the ball, and he still put up pretty good numbers for North Carolina. But if Ty Lawson had come back and been on that team, we'd be talking about Ed Davis amidst all of these guys as well. And so those are the guys that, because they're big, and maybe Cole Aldrich is in that mix too, might end up kind of sneaking ahead. But I think Wes Johnson goes top 5.
Yeah, you and I have been arguing about Cole on Twitter all year. I'm a fan. I think, we were talking about possible comps for him and by email yesterday, and you said Przybilla, and I said, yeah, I mean, we both agreed he could be a better Joel Przybilla, which isn't as terrible as it sounds. I mean, if you let's say you get a better version of Joel Przybilla in this year's draft, and you're going to get somebody who averages 12 points, 10 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks a game as your starting center. Basically, Eric Dampier in a contract year, but every year. That's pretty good for this draft because I don't think this is that great of a draft. Would you take that with the 6th pick?
Yeah, I probably would. I like Aldrich, and again, some of this is Kansas bias come in, and I tend to watch every single game Kansas plays. I mean, one of the things is physically, he looks like Greg Ostertag, and that turns you off kind of right away. And
Right.
especially wearing the Kansas jersey. I mean, just the initial look at him can sometimes kind of hurt guys. He's way more athletic than Ostertag is.
Yeah.
Way more active and a better offensive player than Ostertag was at Kansas. However, Ostertag was also a lot bigger than Cole Aldrich was. And you know, one of the things that I think actually matters in the league at center is there's a difference between 6'11" and 7'1". And once you break that magical 7 foot and get into like 7'1", 7'2", now you're in elite company in the league as far as size goes. And there's some things you can do just flat out because of your size. 6'11" is much more pedestrian in the league as far as big guys go. And he doesn't really stand out as physical profile. He doesn't have the longest arms in the world. And so he's not going to have a physical advantage over other guys. I think he's a pretty decent athlete, and he runs the floor well. He's active. He blocks shots. He rebounds. He's got that really funky shot, but though it's very accurate. He shoots from about 15 feet. He loves to kind of hit it right at the top of the key. And, you know, he's effective kind of in that pick and pop mode as well. I think he'll be a decent NBA center. You know, definitely not top 10, probably not a top 15 center in the league, but a starter.
I think he's going to be better because he blocks shots. He's almost blocking 4 a game. I like guys who, if you're putting up stats like that significant, then it's going to translate to at least some degree. But I agree with you on the 7'1" thing. I think that was one thing people missed about Robin Lopez, is that he's a big dude. Like, you see him in person, and I just thought he was bigger than I thought he was going to be, and I asked around, and he's a legitimate 7'1", I think. I don't think he lists himself that way, but I, you know, as you said, when you're in that 6'10", 6'11" range and you're not a totally elite athlete, it's pretty tough to have a huge impact. At the same time, I think he's a starter. And, you know, if I have a choice between him and going down that DeMarcus Cousins road, I know Cousins has more talent, but how many teams do you think Cousins will be on before he's 29 years old? 3? You know, that's the part that scares me.
That is the part that scares you, but I think GMs anymore, they're so risk averse, but they're risk averse about saving their jobs. I think less than risk averse about getting a bad seed. And I think if they draft well on talent, they feel like they have a better position to say, well, you know, listen, I drafted the guy, I clearly saw the talent. He ended up being a screw up, and that was his fault. Then drafting a guy who ends up not being able to play in the league, and then everybody says, but you passed on this guy who's dominating everybody right now. And so I think because of that, we've seen the shift now back. And, you know, I think this is the unstated thing about the draft, is that GM's egos and their risk assessments are all part of the equation. It's not just based off of who can play and who's a fit. This is another big factor that comes in to play, and you know, you see it even just with some of the lobbying that goes on, even with the rookies in the league, like, you know, the Kings lobbying writers to refer to Tyreek Evans always as a point guard, or sending out all sorts of information about how, you know, now that Stephen Curry and some of these other guys are coming on, how he's better and been there all year. I mean, that's not just about promoting a player. It's about making sure that everyone understands that we made the right call in the draft.
Right. You and I both love tiers, especially with the draft. So obviously Turner and Wall, top tier. Next tier, Favors, Cousins, Wes Johnson. Is there anybody else you'd put in that tier?
No.
Just those 3?
Just those 3.
Then the next one, we got Cole Aldrich. I would put Aldridge as the last guy in the other tier, but we differ on that. Aldridge, Greg Monroe, Ed Davis, who's not in the tournament. Who else am I missing?
Aminu, who, here's a guy who, Alfred Aminu, plays for Wake Forest, who's a guy who could really help his stock. I mean, he's super athletic. He's crazy. He's 7'4" wingspan, 6'8". One of these guys who has a great motor, runs the floor, doesn't really know how to play basketball yet. His second year in the league, but from all the physical tools to be just a terrific NBA player. If he blew up in the tournament, he's a guy who could do that. And 2 other guys, maybe one, Greg Monroe. who's, I think, one of the hardest players in this draft to get your arms around, because he's the most skilled big man in the draft.
I agree.
He's freakishly skilled, great floor vision, great passer.
Great passer. Surprisingly awesome passer.
Yeah, almost like a Vlade Divac type of passer. In fact, he reminds me quite a bit of Vlade Divac in just his kind of skill level that he has out there. But he's not a great athlete, especially laterally. He really struggles. He's not going to play above the rim. He's got a little bit of the same problem. He's probably a center, but he's 6'11", isn't particularly long. And then on top of all that, his motor, sometimes it revs up, sometimes it doesn't. He's been doing a better job of that at Georgetown. But, there's times when he just flat out disappears in games. And I think teams are more confused on him than anybody, because you love having a big man who's so skilled, who can play just about anywhere on the floor, including with his back to the basket. But you just wonder, can he compete against NBA-level athletes? And then Hassan Whiteside, who's the exact opposite of Greg Monroe. He's the bizarro Greg Monroe. He is freakishly athletic. The guy's had 3 triple-doubles where he's blocked 10 shots, grabbed 10 rebounds, and scored at least 10 points in the game. He almost had a 4th this season. He runs the floor like a deer. You just watch him and you're in awe of the physical tools, and he has no clue how to play basketball.
Ooh, I don't like that.
Those are the 2 guys that, if you could combine those 2 together, you would have the ultimate number 1 pick in the draft. But their DNA was just split in half.
I think for Monroe, this sounds like a cop-out, but it's going to 100% depend on what team he goes to. If he goes to a team that uses him correctly, I think he could be really effective. But I could also see him going to the wrong team and never being heard from again.
Yeah, I think that's right. I absolutely think that's right. And you see this every year in the draft, right? Jordan Hill goes to the wrong team. And we thought he went to the right team. We thought, the Knicks are terrible, and Mike D'Antoni, no play, goes to the wrong team. We never hear from him again. All of a sudden he starts playing in Houston now. He starts to look a little bit better. Some teams are just the wrong fits for guys, and they're going to be buried. And then other teams, you're going to get lots of minutes. They're going to focus on your development, and you'll look great. I think that's right and a lot of it's going to be system for Monroe.
Last question. Give me 2 sleepers to look out for who are second-rounders, high second-rounders or low first-rounders that you think could win some people over this next week or so.
Yeah, watch New Mexico, Darrington Hobson, who a lot of guys like. He's got a little bit of some Penny Hardaway in him. 6'7", can play the point, can play the 1-2-3. Not an off-the-charts athlete, but very high basketball IQ, a guy who might get 7-8 assists, could score 20 points in a game, could grab 10 rebounds, will grab some steals, kind of does everything for them. A lot of guys like him. I'm not in love with him because I just wish he was a little bit more explosive as an athlete, but he's not that far off from an Evan Turner type of player. Evan Turner is also not the most explosive athlete that you have. Another guy that no one's probably seen play this year, and actually a team that I think could be a sleeper in the tournament, I think they were underseeded, is BYU's Jimmer Fredette. Look at the numbers that this guy's been putting up in a much stronger Mountain West Conference. The kid comes from New York. He's got a killer crossover, can score, can really shoot the 3, has great floor vision, isn't an off-the-charts athlete, but a pretty good athlete, and is a point guard with just a lot of swagger. He's a guy who I think if he blows up, and he's had some big games in the Mountain West Conference, if he blows up in the tournament, they're going to play Florida in the opening round, and that could be a high-profile matchup. In the second round, they're probably playing at Kansas State. He could be a guy who could easily end up sneaking in the first round. I don't think he's there yet, but there's no point guards in this draft. None other than John Wall that really get anybody excited. And he's a guy who I've been watching and who can do it.
I'm actually intrigued by that team because both of their guards can shoot the hell out of the 3, which I enjoy. I like that from a March Madness team.
Good team.
Yeah.
They do have problems with athleticism, and Florida will give them a challenge. I actually think they'll be okay with Kansas State. I actually think they'd be okay with Pittsburgh. As they're a team that I have going to the Grade 8. I think they could. I think Syracuse will give them some problems because of the athleticism on that team. But I have them going to the Grade 8. I think they should have been a 4th, 5th seed. I mean, they were one more loss to New Mexico. They got a 3 seed in the tournament. How these guys got seeded is beyond me. I thought the seeding was just absolutely terrible throughout the whole bracket.
I couldn't agree more. Chad Ford, we will read your prospects to watch column on ESPN.com. Is that going up today?
That's going up today.
All right, good luck. Talk to you soon. All right, stay tuned tomorrow for part 2 of the Mega March Madness podcast. One more note. We're going to do a BS report bracket. Joe Mead, is that set?
It may be set surely by tomorrow's podcast. It will be ready to go. Just go to the Tourney Challenge page on ESPN.com, search BS Report. It should also be featured on the front.
Yeah, and if you can't find it that way, just go to my Twitter account, which is SportsGuy33. I'll have a link there. Tomorrow morning, we encourage you to join the BS Report bracket. We'll have to come up with some sort of a prize. Maybe a weekend at Joe Mead's house.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned for part 2. One last thing, we got to call our buddy JackO at work to discuss the tragic death of Corey Haim and the end of the 2 Coreys era. Let's give him a ring.
Complex Litigation, this is John.
Oh, Johnny.
What's up, Willie?
The flag is at half-mast of the JackO Simmons relationship.
That's true.
It's a sad day.
That's a sad week.
Sad week, I should say.
That's right.
We're down to 1 Corey.
1 Corey out of 2.
And I liked having 2. I liked having 2 Coreys.
Absolutely. Now there can never be a 3rd season.
No, only in our hearts.
Absolutely.
Walk us through your emotions as you stumbled on the interwebs and found out the news.
Well, I was actually working, but I was not in my office. I was out and about, and I got a text message from my friend Alyssa announcing the news to me. So it was good that I heard it from a friend rather than just the cold of the internet.
That's the way you want it to go down.
Absolutely. And then, I can't say it was really surprising, as I said to you in an email.
Yeah, it was definitely not a surprising.
Because normally in a circumstance like this where somebody young dies out of the field, I would say, wow, that's really unbelievable. But as I said to you, it was totally believable. Yeah, anybody that watched the 2 Coreys or the I keep wanting to say behind the music, True Hollywood Story, would state, let's say.
It, I would compare it to the Brittany Murphy news.
Exactly.
Which, there'd always been rumors about her, but at the same time, that got oh, wow, one of those reactions out of me. And this one, it was more like one of those, oh, come on, Corey.
Right, exactly.
It's like he knew it was coming, but you're still disappointed it happened.
I wouldn't really say it came out of left field. Let's put it that way.
No, I think it didn't even come out of third base.
No, it was came from the pitcher's mound, maybe.
That's about it. Yeah.
It was. It's terrible. The guy's 38 years old, and essentially from the time he was about 18, would you say his life has been a complete train wreck?
Yeah, probably you'd have to start with maybe Dream a Little Dream 2 in 1995.
Okay, 95. So he was 23 then.
Yeah, something like maybe 21, 22. Yeah. He rode the high life for a few years, and then things turned.
He was on top of the mountain in Hollywood. I'm sure he certainly lived in the fast lane and dated starlets and got into all the right clubs and the whole 9 yards. And people offered him things, and he was indulged.
I think one of the reasons that we loved both the Coreys and their show was that, as you said, top of the mountain. It really wasn't a big mountain. Maybe they thought the mountain was Mount Kilimanjaro, and for the rest of us, it was a mountain you might climb in an hour.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I wrote this in my mailbag today. I think that was my favorite thing about Corey Haim was that he really seemed to believe like he was one break away from getting it back.
Right. On the 2 Coreys, when his father came to visit and said, it was always Corey's dream to win an Oscar.
Yeah.
And he said something about don't bet against him winning an Oscar. And you and I made the joke at the time, is there some place we can go to bet against that?
Right.
But he really, he and his family really believed that someday, and the Academy Award goes to Corey Haim. That just wasn't going to happen.
I think the dad said that, and then you looked at me and said, I'm going to go ahead and bet against that, actually.
Exactly.
You know what?
And
here's my buddy.
You made a great point about how Corey Feldman just lacks any self-awareness whatsoever.
Yeah, it's out the window for him.
Just none. He makes these grand pronouncements and hyper serious and just no clue of his role in American culture, pop culture.
Yeah.
But you kind of rooted for Haim because as much of a train wreck as he was, and as many bridges as he burned, and he lit many aflame apparently. You kind of hoped he would make it and just be like, he doesn't really deserve to go out like this, destitute essentially.
And he was self-aware to some degree. Like I did feel like. Whereas Feldman had talked himself into some sort of alternate universe where he was a singer and dancer, and Lost Boys 2 was in the works and all this stuff. And Haim was just kind of at a different place, a sadder place.
Yeah, it's terrible, and it's, of course, the old Hollywood cliche, but town gets somebody and chews him up and spits him out. And, it's happened so many times now. I don't know if there's something that's more cliched than cliched, but whatever it is, that's what he was.
Well, we saw... I'm sure you watched the Oscars on Sunday night.
I actually did not watch the Oscars.
Oh, you missed the John Hughes tribute.
I was a little. If I knew there was going to be a John Hughes tribute, I would have watched that. But I'm not really a huge fan of the Oscars. Plus, I didn't see any of the films that were nominated this year. I think you and I are the only two people in America that did not see Avatar.
Yeah.
And I would like to see The Hurt Locker. I was glad that won, but I did not watch any of the Oscars. And I wouldn't watch Avatar at gunpoint.
They had a nice John Hughes tribute.
Right.
And eventually, I think it was like the normal people were Matthew Broderick and John Cryer. Then you had Judd Nelson, who, as I tweeted, looked like he was going to take a cab back to the homeless shelter after.
Right.
Macaulay Culkin, who is just really weird to see now in any capacity.
Yeah,
he's kind of tiny. He looks like strung out, cigarette smoking, Home Alone kid. It's just.
Right.
Ali Sheedy would look like 40 Miles of Bad Road. Molly Ringwald, I don't even know what happened. I'm not even sure it was her. And then I can't. and
Anthony Michael Hall, right?
Yes, and Anthony Michael Hall, who's now morphed into a different human being.
Right.
Yeah. And
he does a lot of USA movies, doesn't he? Or shows?
Yeah, he's on like a USA type thing. It got me thinking though about child actors, and you're just screwed. Like I don't know why I would possibly want either of my kids to ever become a child actor. I can't think of a good reason.
I mean, aside from Ron Howard, I can't think of any others where things turned out well.
No. It's usually going to go south.
And it's just, when you peak when you're 15 years old and it's all downhill from there, it just can't end well. You're not going to be grounded. You're used to everybody saying how wonderful you are and catering to your every whim. So to now go back and be a quote-unquote normal person, it's got to be a huge meteoric fall.
I also think when you've had a taste of the good life and you're going to a club and it's Corey Haim, they're opening the ropes for you, and come on, hey, can I buy a drink? And
right.
Girls are throwing themselves at you, and it's almost like the record stops.
Right.
And it's like, can I go back to being the guy where the ropes went up? And they're like, no, you're not the guy anymore.
Well, I think you and I and our friends in college used to talk about this when we were in college, and we did all the things that 18 to 22-year-olds do in terms of drinking and carousing and what have you. And we, of course, were normal college students with no money. So we used to talk about it, I think, in terms of celebrities or in terms of athletes that get a big contract, like right out of college or right out of high school, and suddenly you're a millionaire.
Yep.
So imagine being 18 to 22 and doing all the things you do and then having access to untold millions of dollars. Imagine how crazy you would go. It would happen to anybody, any of us in college, if suddenly you were handed a check for $20 million. It just would not have ended well.
I mean, you used to handle it poorly when your grandmother used to send you a check for $50 for some holiday. We'd go to Joe D's and be like, drinks at me!
Exactly.
I'm loaded tonight.
Let's get the keg. That's right. Exactly. So
it would have been really bad.
Imagine that multiplied by 1 billion times.
It would have been really bad. Or imagine if we had drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine having a driver in college.
Oh, yeah.
Pile in, fellas.
Yeah, that would have been ugly. That would have been really ugly.
It's not good. And then the more you up the stakes, the the more damage you're doing to yourself. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, hey, want to do a reel? Right. Yeah, sure, I'll do a reel.
Absolutely, sure, right.
I'd love one.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Would you like to do it off my breast? Yes, I would.
By all means.
That sounds fantastic.
And that's when the behind the music says, and that's when it all went horribly wrong, or that's when it all took a turn for the worst. Exactly.
So, the Hamster's funeral.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of speculation from us about maybe what Feldman might be capable of. I don't know if you saw the Larry King interview.
I did not. I read about it, though. A friend of mine sent me a link to some of his comments from Larry King.
I would urge you to check it out.
Where he referred to Haim, that he was hoping that someone would have gone to Haim and said, look, you're a living legend.
Yeah.
Legend maybe a little strong for Corey
A lot of
Haim.
moments like that.
Maybe a little strong. So, he was everything I hoped he would be.
Just wait till the funeral, my friend.
As Dennis Green said, he was what I thought he was, to paraphrase. And then I tweeted you, and as my friend said when she broke the news to me, she said the one good thing, if there is anything good, is that Feldman will write some horrific song about the whole tragedy.
Yeah.
And then you said that you hoped that he would sing Candle in the Wind at the funeral.
Yes, Candle in the Wind.
Of course, you called it Candle to the Wind, but you're not really good with the song names and lyrics generally, so...
You said Candle to the Wind was on the album that I was going to have with Uncle John's Cabin.
Because you thought the Grateful Dead song was Uncle John's Cabin, right?
Yes,
Candle to the Wind was the B-side to Uncle John's Cabin.
I have a little music dyslexia. Yeah. I'll be the first to admit it. I don't know. Did we ever tell that story in the podcast? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but you had there was another one. I couldn't remember what the other one was. I think it was a Cure song, wasn't it? It was Let's Go to Bed, but you had didn't you have different lyrics for it?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Uncle John's Cabin was pretty embarrassing, though. Yeah. I really thought it was Uncle John's Cabin. But yeah, if he could do Candle in the Wind.
Yeah.
And I wrote this the mailbag today because it actually, the name fits because it would start out, Goodbye, Corey Haim.
Yeah, it works. It works musically.
Yeah, it would be good. I'm expecting big things from Feldman.
Now,
I think this rejuvenates him.
Is Feldman with his wife now or not with his wife?
They are separated.
They are.
I think
could be the thing that brings those kids back together.
You know, the Valentine's Day performance, which is on YouTube, I've urged people to check it out before. I think she would have separated from him then, but it took her about 6 months to recover from what had happened and come to grips with it, and then the separation happened.
Since his serenading her was basically an assault, I can see why it would take some time to recover.
There's some remarkable Feldman YouTube. I mean, you could really go a solid hour, and I'm not saying I have or I haven't. You could go a solid hour looking at his performance of Honesty in 1993. I think is really good.
So you've heard? You don't want to admit to ever having watched it, but you've heard that it's pretty good?
Word of the street. Dream a Little Dream 2. I may or may not have been forwarded that today and watched it. He has a nice music montage where he does the Michael Jackson dance. His Valentine's Day song's tremendous. There's some live performances. I'm just saying, if you have an hour to kill, I've heard it's a fun way to maybe kill it.
It's been a rough year for Feldman between Michael Jackson and Haim.
Yeah.
Had you ever reconciled with Michael Jackson, or did that didn't end well?
I don't think it ended well, Johnny.
No, so that was maybe that wasn't as rough as the Haim one for him.
In fact, I forgot because I may or may not have been watching some Two Corey's clips as well to
get over your
part of the grieving process.
Sure.
I wanted to watch the Let's Do This Man scene.
The hooded sweatshirt, sunglasses.
Hooded sweatshirt. Yeah, they didn't have that part online, but they did have the part when they're in the diner. And I'd forgotten that Haim basically accused Feldman of walking him into molestation. And the implication was that, since it's unclear if Corey Feldman as a child star knew a ton of people who might have done that, that it was Michael Jackson.
That's what one was sort of led to believe, speculatively, yes.
And it was edited in a way that it was almost like they had edited out the part when he said who it was.
Right. Because why else would Feldman bear all this responsibility for it if it was just some, assistant director or some other random guy? Well,
Mr. Haim is dead and Mr. Jackson is dead. I think it's time to get that video out. It would be possible for anybody to get sued, I think.
Yeah, probably.
If he said something, I think we should be able to see that now.
Absolutely. Full investigation.
So, yeah, Feldman's alone. Let's talk about anything else you got any other takes on that, or are we done?
No.
I mean, we owed it to Haim.
Because we had talked about the two Coreys before, so now we have closure. That was important.
Yeah, I'll find that. I'll tweet that podcast link because we did devote, I think it was 2 summers ago. Was it 2 summers ago?
Maybe. Whenever the show was on, it's been a couple of years now.
2 summers ago, we had a whole 2 Chorus podcast that I was a little hesitant about, and America responded.
I was wondering about the thoughts of this awful psychiatrist that they went to for couples counseling who spoke entirely in generic platitudes. I wonder about her thoughts in this after Corey Haim's passing.
Maybe, why can't A&E have a special?
How about her thoughts?
Yeah, bring everybody back. Anyway, all right, Jen, did we cover everything?
Yeah, I think so.
We sure?
I think so. I've got nothing else.
I will see you next week. You're coming to sunny LA.
Absolutely.
Talk to you
soon. I'm excited. All right.
Bye.
See you, buddy.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
To thank you for making Subway footlongs famous. Now enjoy any regular footlong as a $5 footlong. That's right, any, including your favorites like the savory chicken, bacon, and ranch. Any Subway regular footlong is just $5. Hurry in.